Just a couple of just housekeeping items. We are broadcasting, and I think we'll probably do that for all the other workshops as well. We generally don't broadcast workshops, but given the importance of the budget, it's good to have the public be able to at least sit in that way. As far as the workshops are concerned, the council doesn't take any votes during workshops. It's all informational gathering. So this is a ongoing process. We have an agenda, and I'll read it in just a second, where we'll gather information, be talking about it. It's likely that we'll revisit parts of the budget multiple times, and ultimately it will conclude in June, when we will make recommendations in terms of an overall budget and pass a budget at that time. So this will be ongoing. As the school department is one that will be, it's tentatively scheduled to be voted on in May. And the reason for that is that the council does not have sole authority over that budget. What the council will be able to do is to approve a top-line budget. We do not have any authority over line items. And once that is resolved, it's that budget that is then sent to the voters for approval. And so that has to be passed in time to be posted and prepared for the June election. So that's the order. So in terms of tonight, we will be going through introduction of the budget, review of revenue, administrative department budgets, the library, and general assistance. And this is all Mondays. The next Monday, May 2nd, we'll be looking at the public safety budgets. Monday, May 9th, will be the school department budget. Then the 16th is our regular meeting. The May 23rd, maintenance, social services, recreation, public works, water department, wastewater department. Monday, June 6th, will be the capital budget, review of debt, and council review and discussion, which gives us time, if we need it, to continue that discussion forward before we have to vote at the end of the month. So with that, I'll just ask if any councilors have any questions about the process before we get started. Any general comments you want to make before we get started? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to you, Manager Mosier. Okay. We'll kick this in.
So first of all, I just want to start out with somewhat of an apology, just to state that for those of you who are familiar with our budget process, we typically, what you would be presented with tonight would be a complete manager's budget. Unfortunately, due to circumstances outside of our control, we're not quite there yet. We have prepared the departments for tonight. So we've reviewed these budgets and spoken with the individual department heads for some minor changes that we're recommending, or that I'm recommending, that will move forward in my manager's budget. We are not going to cover the Jana's budget, economic development, because she's currently out with COVID. So in fairness to her, and give her the opportunity to address the council on her budget, we'll plug her in at one of the later budget meetings when she's available to be here. We hope to have the completed manager's budget for you for the next meeting, which will be a week from today. We should be able to, over the course of the next couple of days, get through the rest of the budgets that we need to work out, so that we can present to you a rough, very rough figure look at the manager's recommendations for the budget. So the only other thing, we did have one request by the General Assistance Director, if she could present her budget first, because she's here solely for that one thing. So outside of that, I'll turn it over to Josh to just kind of do a rough overview and introduction, and then before we get into the actual departments, we'll start with Tina with General Assistance.
Section 3 covers revenue, and we can go over that a bit perhaps to kick off before we do general assistance. But The general assistance budget is in section 5. And then we can go back to section 4, which covers the administrative or general government departments that has a good long list of the individual smaller departments within that. And the department heads are here to comment on that as well. But as Manager Mosier said, we are unfortunately a little bit behind. I apologize for my part in that, but we are working hard to get it up to speed so that the budget can be completed as soon as possible, so.
One last thing that I was remiss in not mentioning. So far, the process that we've done here at City Hall is, back in January, the department heads were provided information and instructed to start working on and produce their budgets. The department heads got them into us in a timely fashion. And then we've begun the process, we being myself, Josh, and Lynette, our assistant finance director, begun the process of going through each individual item, each individual department budget, line item by line item. We took and we looked and compared to their current spending to see what each line item has for available funds, where there might be indications that they might be over or underspent. And then we took a look at the last several years, 3 to 4 years of historical data to take a look at those individual line items to see again where we might be able to find some items that were underspent or typically overspent and might need to be adjusted up or down, either way. So we went through that process with each individual department, each individual line item, and we've made some changes to individual department budgets. And those department heads have been contacted and made aware of those changes and instructed why we saw it we believed that it was appropriate to make the changes. And so the budgets that you will be looking at tonight have all been through that process. And so the opportunity for the department heads tonight to answer any questions that you may have, and to present, to you what their belief is as to why the needs are specifically within their budget. So, Josh, if you want to start with the revenues,
Sure.
Kick it off.
As you can see on the top line under FY23, which is kind of in the middle of your page, the FY23, the first line is property taxes, which I bolded there, and that's just kind of a plug number because that's kind of one that you back into at the end of the process when you have a better idea of what your overall expenses are going to be and what the other revenues are. More of the other revenues are based on kind of trending out or what they've been historically. That one is kind of one that you work into last, but until we get to there, I've put in a number which is up somewhat from the previous year, just to hold that position as we move forward. The rest of the revenues, you can see that we projected just a total of about 1.1% increase for the total revenue budget so far. Year to date on the revenue, we are at about a total of just under 25 million out of the 26.47 that have been budgeted. So we're right around where we should be at this time of year, and I will probably exceed the budgeted revenue by a little bit. Some of the stuff that still hasn't come in are related to vehicle excise taxes that are, we had budgeted 1.6, we're only at just about 1.16 right now, so that'll keep coming in over the next couple of months. And a few others that are still gonna come in over the remaining period of the fiscal year, whereas some of these, like property taxes, have mostly all been collected because of their due dates in September and March. Other than that, I just would want to throw it open to see if you have any specific questions to go through. We tried to go through each one and look at what they had been historically and make an accurate representation based on whether we knew there was a certain formula that we could use on how things usually trended, or else just kind of trended out on a basis that was reasonable given the circumstances. So,
Just a quick question for Larry. I know last year there was a big swing in valuations and a big change. Do you expect it to hold pretty flat this year? Is there anything that indications that might change significantly?
Well, in 2021 was was really the record-setting year for real estate appreciation. The average property nationwide went up almost 20% in 1 year. So we'll probably see an increase in valuation, similar probably to last year's appreciation for assessment purposes.
So do you think that estimate, the 21 million, do you think it's greater than that? Do you have any sense, or?
It won't increase revenue.
Oh, that's true, it won't increase revenue, but it will increase, yeah. But there's a potential that, so, in terms of, the reason I'm asking the question is, there are really two drivers, essentially, for the mill rate, and that is total expenses, total costs, and then whatever your valuation of your property. And last year, even though we held the expenses flat, we still saw an increase in tax bills because valuations went up by a considerable amount.
Roughly 10%
So
last
that,
year.
and so you're expecting potentially that high again?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me just add, pardon, I should have been up here. But the appreciation in 2020 was less than the appreciation of 2021. So with the appreciation of real estate being higher this year than it was last year, and we have to try to stay with the market as best we can. One of the things that I do when I look at values is I don't try to chase to meet properties nationwide average the 20% increase. If you try to hit a 20% increase, what happens if the market drops? And so I never look at chasing property appreciation in real estate. But if you do see a trend, you have to stay with the trend as best you can. Also, the state requires us to certify at a percentage, a ratio of market value. And if our actual ratio is, greater than 90% on average of sale prices, municipalities can certify at 100%. If our ratio is below, actual ratio is below 90%, we can add 10% to that and certify at 90. Say if our ratio was 89%, we can go 10% higher and certify at 99%. But if we fall below 100% certified ratio, we have to adjust all the partial exemptions, like homestead exemption and veterans exemptions, and adjust those by whatever the certified ratio is. And we try not to do that unless the market is just screaming so bad. But so the bottom line, yeah, we'll probably see roughly about the same increase we had last year for assessment value without new construction.
Don't go anywhere, just in case anybody have questions for Larry? Councilor Blanchard.
Speaking of new construction, Larry, what have we had, what have you seen in value in the last year in new construction in the city?
Well, I haven't actually totaled that up yet. I'm looking at all the permits and going through those. But we should see reasonably about the same as last year for permitting.
Which was?
I don't have that figure with me, but yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that we do realize that with an increase in valuation using the same budget or a similar budget that we had last year. An increase in value means the tax, if we stayed with the exact same levy expenses budget, then the tax rate, the value goes up, the tax rate will go down. And the tax rate did
In the
go down
perfect world.
last year, from 1877 to 18.03. So the tax rate went down. And so something similar to that will probably happen this year if you keep the budget roughly about the same as last year.
Thank you.
Counselor Blanchett, just looking at your question about building permits, we had budgeted this year 40,000 in revenue from building permits, and we're at 107,000 so far this year.
Right, that's in revenue. I
Just the
was-
revenue, not the value, but-
My question was more toward the value
Yep.
of them.
This- yep.
But while I have you on the line, one of the things I noticed, you've taken quite a jump in electrical permits. Last year budgeted 10,000. This, next year, coming up, essentially 23.5. Is there a driving force on that one?
Actually, Lori, could you speak to that, please?
It's the solar farms.
Ah.
We grasp a lot of money from the solar farms.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're all set.
Yeah, leave it
You don't
open
wanna
for
keep going?
any specific questions that you have, other than me going down line by line.
Yeah. I think we're good right now.
Okay.
So we'll visit revenue again, I'm sure, but if Tina House, if you want to come up to the podium and we can take a look at the general assistant budget.
What number section is that?
So since you're the first one, Tina, and
I know,
you
I'm
so
thinking that was a
graciously
bad idea.
volunteered to be the first one, probably just appropriate to just kind of give a general overview of what the general assistant's budget is utilized for, and then we-
Okay, my name is Katina Van Adestein. I have been the GA director for 18 years, and I am going to say this has probably been the hardest year since I've ever done it. It's been so different, and so many things have changed. Budget-wise, I actually didn't dare change it because of where with the COVID and all the different rule changes, everything is so up and down, I didn't dare go either lower or higher. I literally left it as it is. I have seen increases, more so in housing due to the city having a larger homeless problem currently. I'm sure you guys have heard all about it. Bangor, all the larger municipalities are having quite a hard time. But overall, that seems to be my largest increase was in housing. But I did leave it as it was last year.
And when you say housing, that's predominantly paying for hotel rooms for temporary
This year,
stays
that's
and-
what it's been, correct. Like, in the past years, general assistance does not pay for hotel rooms. There was a change for COVID. That anybody who was homeless, we did our best to make sure they had a roof over their head. And since then, it's just kind of gone rapid. I'm really not sure why. We do have an agency, Down East Community Partners. that is helping a majority of them currently, but that funding will be running out, I'm afraid, soon. So,
Tina, can you speak to the issue in terms of just the requirements of GA as it relates to, for example, you have budgeted city appropriation around $35,000.
yep.
But can you talk, just so that people understand, in terms of when you get that request that puts you over the 35,000 and the obligations to provide service, what that looks like? What does the state require of municipalities when it comes to general assistance?
If we go over that budget,
Well, just what they require in terms of response. At what point do municipalities have the right to say, well, we're out, we only budgeted 35,000?
We don't. That's it. We don't have the option. So if I've used my 35,000, we are required to help them. Money, whether the money's budgeted or not. It's state law, so. There is no, so I just tried my best to make sure that what we have budgeted, I have yet ever to go over it, so.
Councilor Hanson.
Do you expect, or do you have no idea whether regulations will change back to pre-COVID times and whether that'll affect?
I am actually on the Maine Welfare Directors Association Board, and we are having multiple discussions currently regarding ordinance changes and if this is permanently going to be affecting all municipalities, or if we will go back to pre-COVID. It's still up in the air, but it is being discussed currently, so, yeah.
Councilor O'Donnell.
Really hard, actually.
Please forgive my ignorance, this is
Sure.
my first budget round. But it says reimbursement from state 70%,
That is correct.
but that number isn't 70%. Help me understand that.
Okay, so if you see in the narrative, I know you guys just got your books, you haven't been able to read down through it, but under the part where it says the state rate is 70%,
The next page, Councilor Allen.
underneath that, it says the categories. So there's only specific categories. So the 70% comes directly from what I give to my clients. So in my budget, power, miscellaneous, housing, food, medical, household, burial, cremations, and heat. Actually, the miscellaneous needs to come off of that. We need to make a correction. It used to be in that, I apologize. I created a new line item for burials and cremations, and miscellaneous, that used to come out of miscellaneous, so I need to make a correction on that. But those specific line items are what we get reimbursed for. So the rest of it, like my payroll, miscellaneous, like the dues and memberships and training and travel expense, those we do not get reimbursed for. That's strictly city.
So it's 70% of those items on that.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
Sorry for
welcome.
my ignorance.
No, no problem. It was a bit confusing.
So are you saying you managed to get through this last year and not go over your budget even though all of these, how did you do that?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have an organization, Down East Community Partners. Funding wise, they have been a big, huge contribution to the housing. The city, works directly with them to make sure, everybody's got a safe place to stay. What I'm getting a little bit scared of is that when that funding runs out, we have had that organization pull many people from different municipalities to put them into our hotels. So, they will soon be here in the city of Ellsworth with no place to stay. So that will be the city's responsibility at that point.
Yeah, you're saying because Down East Community Partners has said, okay, you're gonna come here.
That is correct.
This is how
We're
much
kinda like
we're
the-
paying for
yeah.
this much time, and then once that time runs out, now they're all as Ellsworth
That is correct.
residents, basically.
Yep.
The funding, it was part of all that federal COVID
Federal
relief
COVID
funds.
money, correct.
And so it paid for 18 months of rent support.
Yeah.
A lot of individuals either didn't have housing with a traditional landlord, or they left that relationship because the landlord didn't accept that payment. And hotels have been a very large source
Place for
for
people to
this.
go.
So, and that 18 months runs out in October?
No, the October limit, I was given just a rough estimate because it is a specific amount of funding. So they were guesstimating that the funding was gonna run out in October. I don't know if that's true or not, but the 18 months, I mean, unfortunately, isn't really gonna make a difference because they can still have the funding, but our hotels are actually not gonna be allowing them to stay there coming up for a tourist season,
Yeah.
which is probably June, May.
And Downey's Community Partners, they were getting funding from whomever, the state or the federal government.
That's the-
COVID.
yeah,
And that's how they
COVID
had the money to
relief
help
money.
those people during that time.
That is correct,
Okay.
yeah. That's why, I mean, we had a huge support, because, I mean, they would call me, and we would try and work together, and, I mean, it depended on how long their application process was. Like, if they needed just a week or so from the city to stay in a hotel, and then their relief money from Downey's Community Partners would kick in, and then they would be able to pay for the rest of it. Which is super fantastic until now, when the money's running out and these poor people are gonna have no place to go, so.
How does the MES Center factor into,
They're privately owned, to be honest with you, 18 years I've been here, I haven't really been able to get anybody in there,
oh, okay.
so.
They have very specific rules, and there can be no drug or alcohol use. So that becomes very problematic with this particular population. They also tend to really cater towards families. So single individuals are much harder to place there, so. And it's not very big, I mean, they have very limited space.
Limited
so-
space,
Right.
yeah.
And they're seemingly always full.
I would say, I know it's best guess, and you can only go, but I would say that we should definitely be prepared for that budget to be higher than what we planned. The housing crisis is significant.
Yeah.
It's not just impacting big cities like Bangor and Lewiston, Portland.
It is
It's
everywhere.
everywhere. And unfortunately, and you just heard Larry talk about housing valuations going up, that's driving rents sky high, and it impacts all levels of housing, but in particular, it impacts people at the lower incomes, people who are on subsidies. The availability of housing just isn't anywhere near what it needs to be. And the state of Maine has a growing problem in terms of being able to house individuals who need it. And we don't have enough shelters available. It's a really bad situation. And as a community, we need to be prepared to support individuals and not think that we're just gonna ship them off to Bangor and other communities. We have a responsibility to take care of our citizens as well. So I just think it's something that we just have to keep in mind, and the community needs to be aware that that's something that could happen.
So a few questions. You said that some of these, like Downey's Community Partners is shipping people here, though, from other communities.
Hancock County. I mean, there's, are they Hancock and Washington? No, they're just Hancock County, I believe. So anybody who lives in Hancock County will go to Downey's Community Partners and apply. In Hancock County, I mean, we're the largest facility that has hotels around. I know there is one in Machias that they use too, and Hancock is White Birches. But we're the only place that has hotels that was available for them to stay in. So Downey's Community Partners placed them in our hotels, and all our hotels were willing to sign a contract and work with them to do a certain amount of months to house people until the pandemic was over, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, so.
Are there any verifications for these, for these applicants? Like, proof of income or work requirements or
Oh,
anything?
most definitely, on my end. I mean, I don't do like the application process for Downey's Community Partners, but through general assistance, oh, most definitely. On my end, if they come and ask for assistance from me, I require work searches, 4 jobs a week for 30 days. I require them to write down who they've spoken to with phone numbers, and I contact them just to verify. And honestly, the ones that end up doing that end up with employment and they soar. So, I mean, as long as they can have someone to guide them or help them, sometimes that's just that first step in the door, first step to get them on their way, but they just need someone to help them or give them a little bit of a push to guide them where they need to go, so.
And one last question, under heat, even with the gas prices and fuel prices going through the roof,
Yeah,
it hasn't, the budget's the same as it was for 2022.
right. Here's my issue with that. I kind of wanted to avoid bringing this up, but a majority of the people that have applied for heating assistance through general assistance have been people who are on Social Security. Anyone who's on Social Security goes right just above the general assistance threshold, so they're over income. I created a fund, a fuel assistance fund. I'm gonna say almost 10 years-ish ago, maybe. So I have a fund that's strictly donation, and I use that fund for people such as on Social Security that are just above that threshold that need help. And honestly, those are the applicants that I was getting this year. I received very few applicants that didn't have funding of some sorts. And if they had applied, they'd gone through Downey's Community Partners also, because they still have their thaw fund and their heating fund, which they're supposed to apply for first. I will have to say, though, they've had a huge shortage in employees, so most of their applicants that applied for heating assistance aren't going to be receiving it until, well, they said April and May, so they were behind.
If this, so the state will pay for 70% of actual stuff you give to people, and
That's correct.
they're saying that's gonna be 25,000, they think.
Yeah, that's.
But they'll adjust, if it turns out, oh, actually it was 50,000, or whatever, if it's more, they'll pay
Exactly.
whatever
So
the
I mean,
70%
whatever I
is.
budget, whatever I give to my clients, they will reimburse me, whatever my
Regardless.
budget is, no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless they run out.
Yeah. I mean, there is a threshold for general assistance, but it's off the wall. It's like 1,300,000 and something for like the city of Ellsworth. We would never meet that. I mean, we would never get to the point where we would be able to get 100% reimbursement. I hope.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we never get there. Counselor?
Just for curiosity's sake, this fund that you have that
Yep.
is targeted for over the threshold
Correct.
limits, what kind of revenues do you take in there and expenses? What?
Well, every year I'll do like a silent auction, and I have people who actually, you're no ties on, if you don't decide not to wear a tie. That
Well,
goes
I'm that guy.
That goes to the fuel discretionary fund. We
Okay.
do a silent auction every year, and I actually have donations that come in from certain people every year.
So do you collect 10 grand? Do you collect 5 grand?
Well, I think there's 22,000 in it currently, and I'm gonna say the silent auction usually brings in about $1,800. I'm gonna say probably $1,000 in donations a year.
The 22 grand
Miscellaneous.
you didn't take in one year, though. That's been cumulative, right?
That's correct.
So.
And I haven't, like, the money that I've been receiving in each year, I haven't used all that yet,
Each year. Good.
each year.
Wonderful.
So we just keep,
What a great idea.
yeah, it was, I was trying to come up with a way to help people, that are on fixed incomes and are out there having to pay their own utilities. Like, half the people are on Social Security are getting, what, $750? Can you rent anywhere for $750 anymore? No. There isn't a place that I know of that you can do that. Even the ones that are on like the subsidized housing, they're still paying a pretty large percentage of their income for rent, and then you've got utilities which are through the roof. Food now, heat, power, it's all increased, so they just can't afford it.
But yet they're trying.
Oh,
Which is
yeah, they
great.
are trying. I have a lot of my elderly clients that I'm trying to help, like, they have jobs at Walmart, or, you know, they're on Social Security, they're on fixed income, they're retired. I got a 78-year-old who is walking with a cane and he's working, you know, it's just breaks my heart, but.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for doing that. That's huge.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Relating to housing, and the state of Maine has a new program this year. It's called a deferral program, whereby I think the income is 40,000 or less. If you cannot pay your property taxes, the state has this program, but it's actually more like, it's a loan. They'll pay your property taxes, but you have to sign up, you have to apply, and the state will send the municipality a check to pay your property taxes, but, and they'll continue doing it every year, but once you no longer own the property, that has to be paid back, and I think with an interest rate of like 4%, but it does allow for that to happen, a deferral program for people who can't pay their property tax. But it's,
Can you send me that? Can you send me like that link
Yeah.
of information?
it's a new program for this year.
I hadn't heard of that.
Anything else? All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dan.
thank you.
All right. So we'll move right into the administrative departments. And that's in section 4. And the first legislative department is going to be the council salaries, printing and advertisement. That's for for your meetings and agendas and those things that need to be posted to the newspaper. Conference and meetings and miscellaneous expenses. Expenditure for council meetings and workshops. Conferences and meetings, council members, training sessions and meetings, including meals and travel expenses. And we've been fortunate to do the MMA training online or through Zoom, so hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that, to limit those expenses, but otherwise travel to Augusta and so forth would be covered for any new counselors. Any questions on? Seeing none, we'll move on to the city manager's budget.
Glenn,
Yes, sir.
hang on just a minute, if you would, please. You've got a rather large increase in the finance department. And the reason behind that?
Staffing predominantly, but we'll get to finance,
Okay.
getting ahead of ourselves. But staffing is predominantly, yes,
Yep.
Josh. For the city manager's budget, you'll see it's down slightly. And that's a reflection of a change in human resources, really, is really the main driver of that decrease. And.
Major Mosher,
Yeah.
just in case, if you haven't looked past, if that first cover sheet, which is kind of a summary of everything, each page afterwards is taking each one of those separately with a
Yeah.
detailed budget, so you can follow along and see the detail behind it.
I apologize.
No, that's
yeah.
fine. I just noticed that people weren't turning, so.
Yeah, the first one just is everybody, so and behind the initial breakdown of the budget for each individual department is the narrative section, which explains what the individual line items are for. So as you look down through payroll, obviously, office supplies, travel and auto expenses, that would be for, particularly in this budget, you're gonna see some of these expenses, which are not necessarily for me, but under the manager's budget is also the human resource manager. We have a new individual in human resources, so she's gonna require some training, which is, we left some money in there for her to go to training, her travel expenses. Conference and meetings, there are some conference and meetings, both that I will be attending as the city manager, as well as the human resource manager will be attending, for MMA convention, ICMA annual conference. Professional services is for legal assistance, advice, dealing with personnel matters or other types of consultation that we need with legal, both either myself or human resources. And then miscellaneous expenses covers some occasional employee morale type of issues from the manager's purview to purchase different things or provide lunch or do other things throughout City Hall to help increase morale. Anyone have any questions for me on those line items?
Going back to the legislative.
Yep.
Now that I see the breakdown here. I know that I had agreed to work for free. I think you had mentioned, Mr. O'Halloran, that you were willing to work for free.
I did receive a check.
Oh, that's for 2022. So we're budgeting for 2023. Is it possible, if we've agreed to that, to take that out of the budget? The other thing is there's a $2,500 increase in printing and advertising for council over last year. And then I don't recall having to travel for any meetings, ever.
So the training that new counselors do is, we've been fortunate the last few years has been on Zoom. But if it weren't for Zoom, we have that line item in there for counselors to travel down to Augusta at MMA for that training. I don't know that, maybe some of the more seasoned counselors have done that, but it's only been the last couple of years that they've done it on Zoom, which has enabled us to essentially avoid that travel. But should someone need to travel on behalf of the city for training in your role as a city councilor, that line item would be there for that purpose. When it comes to salaries, we have to budget that because it's in the charter that you receive compensation. What you choose to do with that compensation is up to you. You could turn it back to the city but it would have to go in the general fund at that point. So it's a budgeted expense that we can't avoid based on the wording that's in the charter. And then for the printing and what's the response for that increase?
Well, the city charter requires that your meeting notices are all published in the paper. Printing costs have gone up significantly, and you, by charter, publish your entire agenda. The longer the agenda, the longer publication, the higher the cost.
All right.
Looking at the last couple of years, I don't know that we were appropriately budgeting for that cost based on the actual expenses.
Okay.
Just a side note, unfortunately, it's also a requirement by state law
Not any longer.
that did it pass finally this year?
A couple years ago.
I thought it failed a couple of years ago. So we're not obligated to post in
No,
the.
it's in your charter. so
It's
you
in the
are.
charter, okay.
That could be one of the things that you visit when you consider the charter. As well as the salaries.
other questions on the manager budget? Okay, so we'll move on to human resources. And this is, again, she falls under the manager's budget, but these are things specifically that she needs to complete her job responsibilities. And the biggest thing being job notices. And unfortunately, for some jobs, we still utilize the newspaper. Most of our advertisement we do via social media and other things, but occasionally there are some jobs out there that we have to do some print advertisement for. We also utilize those funds to what's called boosting of our posts. So, and what that allows us to do on social media is make sure that doesn't get lost in all the other hubbub. It brings it right back to the forefront when you log on to the city's Facebook page and so forth. So, and that costs money every time you want to do that. So, and as we all know, there are a fair amount of job opportunities, so we need to continue to fund for that. Supplies is simple for office and other types of supplies that she may need. And events, I'm not 100% sure on that. Do you, from previous years?
Holiday party and,
That's what that is. Yeah. So the events is in the end of the summer months, we'll have a all-employee barbecue at the Harbor Park, and then at the holiday time, we have an all-employee holiday party. So that's what that lineup covers. Any question on HR? All right. And I will let the city clerk address the city clerk budget.
Good evening, Tony Dyer, City Clerk. You will see in your books, payroll is up slightly. Office supplies are also up slightly, and that's just due to a couple years of under budgeting. Our city seal this year is also Adam Wilson from the Highway Department had to weld the seal into the machine. We need a new seal, and it's $750 for the seal. So that's the increase for the office supplies.
Tony, I'm sorry, what seal?
The city seal that we use to certify documents.
Okay, thank you.
We've increased dues and memberships slightly. Me and another deputy clerk are due to recertify this year, and we'll need a couple additional classes to get our city clerk recertifications. And then the same with our training expense. We'll need a couple additional classes for those certifications.
If there's a pause, I would sit down.
All right. Finance, you're up,
All right.
Josh.
Looking at the finance budget, it is up significantly, 16% from last year, but you'll see that most of that increase is driven by the payroll line. You'll remember that last October and November, we added an additional employee in the department to help out with the accounts payable, so that's part of the increase because that was not in there last year. Additionally, one of the tax clerks that are out front, previously her salary had been paid for half out of the solid waste budget. It's now solely under the finance budget where it frankly belongs. So that's part of the increase shifting over into the finance department as well.
So was there a matching decrease in the solid waste?
There-
Haven't looked yet.
They haven't, yeah, well, we haven't gotten there yet, but there will be, yes, accordingly, yes. Pretty much the rest of there was some also built into increases for the deputy clerks a little bit, but not a lot. But really, it's that whole new position in the finance office in that adding the half position into our department. Most of the other lines you can see, we've kept relatively flat or even down in some case, although the training expenses we did bump up a little bit, given that there are, we're all new in the department. Out of the 4 people really in the finance department, I've been there the longest since June, so we want to make sure that they're given the proper training as it comes along as well. So,
And just to be clear, the assistant deputy treasurer, the 2 means there are 2 positions, right?
correct. Yeah.
You'll be here every Monday, so. All right.
No questions on finance department? Assessing. Larry, if you would please join us at the podium.
Larry Gardner, City Assessor. And budget this year over last year is $588 over last year, so it's like 0.5%. I worked with Glenn and Josh on decreasing a couple items. Office supplies went down 300. Travel and auto expense down 500. Training expense went up 700 because we possibly may have to attend some classes this year without Zooming, possibly. Hopefully, Zoom can continue. I wish it would continue forever, actually. It would save a lot of money. But usually these classes are always down in southern Maine, lodging. So training expenses went up 700. Any questions?
Think you're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Code enforcement. Robert, good evening.
Good evening. I'm Louise Roberts, Code Enforcement Officer, City of Ellsworth. And our budget shows an increase in salaries. Once Dwight left, it left me without anyone other than, we hired downstairs, she was the girl that, her name's Bobby Roberts, she was the girl that stopped people from coming in when we first opened for COVID. And when that ended, we needed somebody upstairs once Dwight left, so she filled that. And then Thomas is a deputy code officer and also a fire inspector for the city, which helps out a lot because this is a big town, and when it comes to doing inspections, it's a lot of land to cover. So I think, other than that, from fiscal year '22, we have travel expenses, because there's going to be 3 of us doing training, and we may need the travel. So we lowered the travel from 1,500 to 500, so we lowered it there for fiscal 2023. And then we lowered the professional services down. I saved money aside because we have a commercial electrical inspector who does our Jackson Lab inspections and also some of the solar farms. And I had it up thinking that we may have a solar farm coming, but Glenn assured me that because they've been approved doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna be built. So we'll wait until that happens. And then vehicle maintenance, we didn't have a vehicle in code last year at all. We were using our own vehicles. And as soon as there was an available retired police car, instead of trading it in, they let us have it. And we may end up with another one because, again, Thomas goes one direction and I go the other direction, and the one person has to take their own vehicle. We do get reimbursed for mileage, but in October, I think Glenn said there'll be another one coming offline. Let's see, it's in October. Yep.
Hopefully.
And uniform and clothing, I think we needed some more boots and maybe a couple of pairs of pants. So, that's that. Silence, I'm out of here.
Planning? Elena?
Last minute.
Elena Pikett, City Planner, presenting the planning budget. So, a couple of changes compared to FY '22. Payroll is the more significant one. That's kind of a seesaw with the economic development budget. The other person in the office currently is transferring to another city department. Her pay was partially out of the planning budget and partially out of the economic development budget because she has been serving both departments. The payroll reflected now both takes that out of the economic development budget and fully funds it from the planning budget. Also, it's a change of title from Development Services Coordinator to Assistant City Planner, which is what we're advertising for currently and actually interviewing for this week. So we're seeking a bit more in terms of qualifications and experience. Assistant Planner is the position that was the other position in the office for about 14 years until 2019, when it shifted to this Development Services Coordinator title and responsibilities and sharing with economic development. So it's kind of reestablishing that. So I'd say keep in mind that that reflects the maximum salary range that we've put out there, but it may not be quite that high depending on who we find is the best candidate. The printing and advertising is also an increase. That's similar to what was discussed in the council's budget. We have statutory and ordinance imposed requirements for noticing of meetings, mailings. That includes both all your typical meetings, but also when amendments need to be made. There's usually a significant and widespread mailing associated with that. Everything else is flat until you get to the comp plan reserve account, which is not a new account. It was new last year. And if you recall, the council in February shifted or allocated rather some funds from the TIF funds toward the comp plan. So the remaining $17,500 would bring us to the total $100,000 budget that is anticipated for that effort. So that is reflected in the planning budget and administered through that office. But I would just note that that serves all departments within the city.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next budget would be legal services, and it's pretty self-explanatory. We don't have an attorney on staff, so whenever we have easements, ordinances, personnel matters, planning and code, financial, administrative, we have to consult our attorneys. Labor negotiations was decreased considerably, because for FY '23, we don't have any, thankfully. So barring any sidebars or any minor alterations to the current contracts, we won't have any labor negotiations. But the others are pretty consistent, and in setting those dollar amounts, if you look at the historic expenditures, we tried to keep those in line with what we typically spend. Some of them obviously are a moving target, so we tried to just be as consistent as we possibly could and be somewhat conservative on some of those figures, so.
Speaking of moving targets, Glenn.
Yes, sir.
Your small claims collections,
Mm-hmm.
given the prior 4 years, are you sure $2,000 is going to be enough?
Well, we looked at what we have currently spent in that line item, and legal services. And to date, we're at 22%, so we haven't spent $2,000 to date. So that's why we went with that figure. It doesn't seem to be, we don't seem to be utilizing a lot of that service currently, so.
Okay.
Elections, you want to cover that one?
Good evening, Tony Dyer, City Clerk. So your elections budget, the total budget this year is $40,258, which is $273 more than last year. You will see a reduction in the overtime, and the reason for that is when there's a large election, like a presidential or a governor, we'll hire a deputy registrar to come in and work for about a month and a half before the election to do all the absentee processing. I'm not anticipating that expense for any elections this fiscal year, so that's been reduced. I have increased the payroll part-time line due to minimum wage going up, so all my election workers will be getting a pay raise because of minimum wage. As well as the deputy registrar payroll. She's unionized, so there's a required increase to her salary. Everything else is about the same, with the exception of the programming, which we had to increase for the DS200 machines that tabulate and calculate all the ballots. The state has not sent out new leasing material yet, so I am just putting a standard 10%-ish figure on that, because that's what I anticipate I will be hearing in the near future.
The only comment I would make is just a reminder to us that with the school board presenting their budget, we may need to add some meetings to vet that through as a council before the vote in May. Because if we don't meet, and I don't know the exact date, but we have to, it has to be a public notice and all of it, and for the elections. And if we miss that time frame, we will have to have a special election, which will drive the costs up. So I just put that out there in advance, that if collectively we need more time, we need to build that into our schedule so we can meet the approval time frame, so we don't end up with a special election.
And I think just due to the timing this year, we were a little bit behind, I think, schedule from in the past. To try to alleviate some of that need, I met with my department, and we've chosen to hand count municipal ballots for the June election. Just because part of the timeline that Chair Hamilton's referring to, I would have to have my ballot sent to the company that does the printing of the ballots for those machines by next week. And with the school budget not being approved by city council, it's about a $2,000 cost for them to print my ballots and program that school validation vote into the machine. And I wasn't certain that that was going to happen, and I didn't want to waste election funds. So we've chosen to hand count. Then I can print ballots here in-house, in essence, as needed for absentee processing and beyond. So that was a choice we made this year to try to save some of the timeline issues.
Gene, you got a question?
Well, last year I heard a lot of people complaining because they didn't get notified that there was a election, like not an election, but a vote in the primary time there. Like on the school budget, I think was the only thing on there.
Find a school budget, yeah, it was.
And people were like, oh, I didn't know nothing about it, you know?
I can't speak to last year. I was not the city clerk
Yeah.
last year.
Is
I
it-
think historically in Ellsworth, our school validation has always been in line with the state primary pending budgetary issues. So I would just note to the citizens that when there's a June primary for the state, be looking for your municipal ballot. We do post a notice of election on our website, Facebook, and my deputy clerk, Marcia, posts it in several places around town with 30 days prior to the election. And you can always call the clerk's department and ask when the elections are coming, and we'll certainly give you the dates that we're planning.
Is that the first Tuesday or the second?
It's June 14th.
June 14th. So at this point, June 14th is the date that the school budget should be on the referendum unless,
And there will be other things on there this year,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Economic development, we're going to revisit when she's available. And Jason,
Five.
he's a little slow.
3, 2, 1.
He did that on purpose.
It's late.
Sorry, I don't have a copy of the agenda, so I didn't notice. Good evening, counselors. Jason Ingles, IT Director. I tried to keep things as flat as possible. However, you will notice there is a significant increase in my budget this year. That is largely due to the purchase of the Cassell software, the second half of that in my budget. And also because this is a transition year, we'll be maintaining maintenance on 3 systems for this year only. So this is a temporary 1-year jump that will go back down to normal next year. We also lost $10,000 in revenue from Hancock County. We were hosting their Spillman server on our equipment, but they used their ARPA funds to buy their own equipment, so they're gonna be hosting that themselves. So we won't be getting that revenue next year. And those are the significant changes with my operating budget. And I should note, this is technology budget for all city departments with the exception of the library, water, and sewer. They're budgeted separately.
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
your payroll, you held the line on that?
We're told to budget that as it was the prior year, so that's how I sent it
Okay.
in, so.
Do Kobe?
You want to do, I wondered if that was next, yep.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is Kobe, which is our broadband network. We're a little bit down this year, 15% decrease. Not anticipating spending as much on the miscellaneous expenses. We had planned on purchasing fiber optic mapping software, which I ended up not doing this year. When it came down to it, I couldn't justify the expense of that software for the size of our network. And also, without knowing what the future of us doing any kind of future broadband build-out I didn't feel it was prudent to purchase that software till I had a better idea where we were headed with that. So you'll see that came back down to where it was previously. Power was increased, electric rates are up. We have some more equipment in there using more electricity, so that did get increased. But overall, looking at a decrease on that account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then joint offices, this is, just kind of covers the whole building, everyone, so our telephones, printing and advertisement again, continues to be an issue for multiple different departments. Office supplies, this is, we decreased a lot of the office supply individual accounts throughout the individual line items because not all of our supplies can be more centralized and purchased and then disseminated out through the departments as needed. Postage and shipping continues to be an expense for the city. We have a machine, but we have to utilize that machine for any large mailings that we have to do, tax bills, and when we have to do other notices out to the public. Miscellaneous supplies, miscellaneous expenses, and office equipment and maintenance, which we zeroed out at this point. And it's pretty. Questions there. Insurances, those continue to go up. The vehicle insurance is $37,000. Building and property, as a whole, the budget's up 3.5%. Building and property, we budgeted at $24,000. Road treatment coverage, $350. Volunteer firefighter insurance, we reduced because we don't have that many volunteer firefighters. Police liability, general comp liability, and public official liability, and then ambulance medical malpractice.
Glenn, what's road treatment coverage?
That is a good question.
It's on the next page.
It's
That,
in the,
yeah. Estimate for coverage of road salt contamination to private water supplies resulting from plowing and sanding operations.
Okay.
so if we contaminate your well, we gotta pay for it.
Oh, it's on the next page, I'll be doing.
And you'll see in the description, well, actually, all of these are estimates. So we did our very best based on previous historical costs and looked at what potentially could be increasing the budget, forecast the budget. Employee benefits, I'm gonna let Tony take that one if she doesn't mind, because she's way more familiar with the figures than I am. Former HR.
Good evening, Tony Dyer. So there is an 11.7% increase in employee benefits over last year. And you're gonna see a substantial increase in Social Security, FICA taxes, that's the payroll expense. A lot of our employees are unionized, so that's a best estimate based on those new numbers. The next line, we have increased our Maine State retirement contributions by about $20,000. But if you look down to the ICMA contribution line, that's been reduced. And the reason for that is Maine State Retirement last fall, some of you may remember, opened their enrollment up for those that chose not to enroll years ago, now had an opt-in opportunity, and many of our employees switched from ICMA to the Maine State Retirement Plan. Health insurance, we are anticipating an increase in January for our premiums, so I think that was just an estimate that Josh and I had put together based on the average increase over the last couple of years, which is around 9% typically on a premium. Unemployment insurance, I have reduced. We spent a lot in FY '21, and that was a lot of people filing unemployment during COVID. Even if they had worked as an election worker here for one election for 3 hours, we ended up paying a portion of their unemployment. So we had a lot of claims that year. I'm not expecting that this year. I think the job market is such that we shouldn't expect to have a lot of unemployment claims. Workers' compensation is up to $290,000 from last year's $150,000. We've had a couple of significant workers' comp claims, and this year, I think our bill was actually about $240,000, so it was under budgeted last year. We've gone through a workers' compensation audit where they review a lot of our 1099 data, our payroll data, injuries, and assess where our rate should be. And due to some very large claims, I'm anticipating another year of about $290,000. The cafeteria plan, I've increased by about $2,000. The cafeteria plan covers some of the city offered benefits like fitness reimbursement if they select that. In this line item, we also have COLA raises that we've included in the budget. And I'm gonna go ahead and toss this particular item off to the city manager.
Yeah, so as a placeholder, at this point in the budgeting process, we've built in a 5% COLA for non-union employees. So these are all the folks who work here at City Hall who aren't covered under union contracts. In past years, as far back as most of us can remember, that figure's been about 2%. But with the current inflation rate and just the general cost of doing business, in order to maintain employee levels that are can sustain the the workload that needs to be done here at City Hall for the community, and we felt that it's appropriate to increase that typical 2% to something that's more of a living wage. So we've built that in as a placeholder, and obviously that number is fluid will be fluid as we go through the remainder of the budget process.
And then the RHS contributions has gone up slightly just due to those are for union members. And so with their union contracts and their pay increases, the contributions must go up. And the group dynamics is flat funded over last year, and that is the total benefits budget.
Just a question in terms of, with workers' comp going up because of injuries, are you looking at any type of safety training plan that needs to be implemented where you need a budget to support that?
We have a safety committee in City Hall, and we review every incident and put into place, look at policies, look at potential procedure violations. Unfortunately, with these particular instances, we don't have a lot of them. They're just high dollar type of injuries. So yes, to answer your question, we do that, and I don't anticipate that really with these individual injuries, there's really, I hate to use the term, but freak accident type of things that all of the, training and planning in the world may not have been able to prevent. So it's just unfortunate that when you have, when we have 100+ employees and we have one or two that, over the course of year, 18 months, have, significant injuries as a result of work, that we would see this type of insurance increase, but unfortunately, that's what we're
And there's
confronted with.
multiple invasive surgeries included in this the last couple of years, so if some of you are in the medical profession, that's not cheap. So,
Councilor Howell.
Is there such a thing in this government workers' comp as an experience mod,
Yes, and that's how they rate us.
right?
Yep,
And
and
what is the
that's,
experience mod that this is based on?
I've not received the completed audit yet.
Okay. Do you
Once I-
receive like an NCCI, is that what it is?
I'm not sure what Maine Municipal calls it, but yes, once they're done the audit, which they have to have done by the end of April, we can share that experience mod with the council.
Do you know what it was last year?
I'd have to go back and look.
It's over one?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's similar to the private sector then? Yeah, okay.
Do we, for those workers, for all that worker compensation output, we're paying a workman's comp insurance company? Or no, we're just paying for those operations and all that?
We're paying, so Maine Municipal Association is our health insurance provider and our regular insurance provider, and so we pay them and they fund the claims. And it is a group trust, so it's kind of collective based on all of their membership, to some degree on the insurance end, but on the workers' comp, it's based on our usage.
Yeah, so it goes up specifically directly to whatever injury is
Right.
happening in your city.
Yes.
Councilor O'Halloran, just for the record, I was able to find the experience modification number for FY '21 from Maine Municipal, excuse me, calendar '21. It was 1.23, and then in calendar '22, it was adjusted up to 1.5.
So 1.5 gathered a bill of 150 grand.
No, we're over.
Yeah, the bill last year was actually $242,000.
Okay.
We're at about 250.
So wow, this is really gonna escalate then.
Yeah,
As
and
far
I'm-
as the experience mod, then.
I'm
You're at
budgeting an
1.5.
increase because of the audit coming. I'm just, I know there's been some significant injury, so I'm being a little conservative with the increase.
But we'll know here while we're going through the budget process.
I would hope so.
Yeah, we'll adjust that figure when we get that experience mod.
Does anyone know what other towns are for experience mods of the city of Ellsworth?
I don't know.
No? Thank you.
Here.
All right, the final one is very simple, miscellaneous, and it's up 0.2%, and those are just our MMA dues, Maine Municipal Association dues, and shellfish dues, which are the $3,000 to the municipal shellfish organization for the 10 or 11 or so clam diggers who reside in Ellsworth, so that they can participate in that program. That's it for that portion of the budget, and without any further delay, we can move into the library.
Question,
Oh, sorry.
sorry. Can we take a short break before library?
We can.
Thank you.
Run everywhere. Oh, we all back?
We are back.
We're back.
We're back, we're on, we're ready.
We doing
Okay,
all
you ready?
Amy,
All right, thank
take
you.
it away.
Thank you. Amy Weishart, Library Director, and I'm presenting the budget on the behalf of the Ellsworth Public Library Board of Trustees. And as most of you know, this is my last budget presentation, so I've really enjoyed serving the Ellsworth community for the past 5.5 years and working with all of you. We'll definitely miss Ellsworth a lot. So happy to answer questions tonight, and of course, my last day is next Friday, so if you have specific questions, I encourage you to email me or contact me after this meeting as well. So I wanted to just give some quick background about the library and about the past couple of years of budget history, especially for newer counselors. So the library, in addition to circulating books and DVDs, we're part of a statewide consortium called Minerva that gives our patrons easy access to several million items throughout the state. It's been an excellent service. We've been on that consortium for about 1.5 years now. We also offer public computers, a lot of technology help. Our staff help people one-on-one with things like formatting resumes, word processing, setting up email. And we've seen a huge explosion in usage of that service that has doubled over the past 6 months. We offer educational programs for all ages, story times, programs for adults, seniors, and that's been a very popular offering for us over the past few years. We offer free tax prep service in partnership with AARP every year. Digital books, movie streaming service. We just launched a service called Canopy that is entirely funded by the Friends of the Library. We have several members of the Friends here in the audience, and I thank them for being here as well. And they're a nonprofit. They fundraise exclusively for library programs and library services. So we're really lucky to have them as well to support us. We also the library is really a community connector. We do a lot of events that bring people together. We have an Ellsworth open house scheduled for May 11th, 4 to 6 p.m. on the library lawn. That's in partnership with the city and with the Chamber of Commerce. We bring nonprofit organizations together, welcome newcomers to Ellsworth. As you know, we have a lot of newcomers to our community. So that's a great way to bring everybody together, have a social event. We've done that now 3 years running. So just a little bit of budget background for the library, and I will share our specific budget. I also included our budget spreadsheet in the packet, and I know Josh has shared information with you as well. So 2 years ago, City Council cut the Ellsworth Public Library city appropriation by $100,000. That was reinstated on a one-time basis with some funds from our fund balance account. So then last year, City Council had asked for that same level of cut to the library budget. So we were able to shave our budget by about $17,000. $60,000 we were able to roll over from the previous year. That was temporary underspending due to COVID. And then for the remaining $23,000, we did have to cut our staffing. So we turned a full-time position into a part-time position. That worked all right for last year. But as I've mentioned, our usage has really skyrocketed. We've seen an overall increase in circulation of 12% just in checkouts. Visits to the library, in-person visits, have gone up 37%. Computer usage has doubled, and then the amount of help that our staff are providing with technology has also doubled. And that's pretty labor intensive. It's a really important service, but it takes a lot of our time. So what we're looking for this budget is to bring back a full-time position. We're also looking at staff pay. I'm going to pull up our actual budget here and put it on the screen. So this first column, I did provide copies of this in all of your boxes, is our current budget requests for fiscal year 23. So we are looking, and I also passed around this, just some budget background, some specifics about what we've changed in our budget for this year, or for this coming year.
So we're looking at staff pay this year because our current starting pay for staff who work the circulation desk, work our public service desk, has been at $13.80 for several years. That's still where it is, and we feel that is really too low. It's lower than equivalent city staff, lower than what staff at other libraries in this area make. So library trustees are looking at raising that to be on par with what equivalent staff would be making at another library. Because of that, that raises other staff who have quite a few years of experience working at the library. So because we are looking at some pay rate changes, we are proposing that we actually take books out of our operating budget. So the city would not be funding library books or library audiobooks. We would be fundraising for that. So that's just one way to balance that cost increase with payroll. So that's our most significant change. See, the other piece that I wanted to mention to all of you, I'm just going to scroll this down a little bit. I ended up just kind of reformatting our budget a little bit because we're one of the only city departments where our benefits are included within our departmental budget. For most of the other city departments, there's a separate benefits budget that covers all the city departments. So if you're looking to compare city departments and kind of do an apples to apples comparison, I just pulled out the benefits and I put it here at the bottom so you can see what our total benefits. So that's health insurance, retirement, workers' comp is in there. And then this yellow line is our total budget without the benefits. So as you can see that over year to year, this goes back to fiscal year 19, that actually has not changed very much. So benefits is where we fluctuate quite a bit, and it can be hard to budget for, especially now going into next fiscal year. We have 2 full-time staff who are leaving, so myself and Abby Morrow. So we have no idea what these 2 new full-timers will opt for in terms of benefits. So that makes it really difficult to budget with the cafeteria plan especially. So.
Amy?
Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting. Is there any way to make that type larger?
Make it there. The whole thing or just the?
Yeah, well, at least that yellow line.
Oh. Sorry, I'm frozen here, so. Oh, we're
Don't-
gonna.
Don't worry about it.
I put paper copies of this in your boxes too, so if you would like a copy.
That's here in the book, that page?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a version that,
It just doesn't have that line in it, right?
yeah, here. Yeah, there's a version that Josh did, and this is my version that's same numbers. I just pulled this out. Is that a little better? Right.
There you go. Thank you.
Yep. The other piece I wanted to talk about is our revenue. So that has been certainly something we have looked at over the past several years, is the funding that we get from other sources. So we are a city department, however, we provide services to many of the surrounding towns. So we get funding from towns that we serve. Some of them do choose to fund us and some do not. 2 years ago, we implemented a card fee to anyone who lives in a town that does not provide funding to the library. So we have actually seen that cardholder fee has surpassed our revenue expectations. We're hoping for this coming year, we'll get some of the regular funding back from the towns. A couple of the towns chose not to fund us this year for various reasons.
How
So
much
we've been
is-
working, yeah,
How much is the card fee now for out of town?
$30.
Thank you.
So we've been working individually with especially some of the larger towns, talking with some of our patrons who use our library, who live in those towns, talking with select boards, attending town meetings. This is town meeting season, so we're having a lot of those conversations now, and our board members are working on that. We also, so as you'll see, year to year, our outside sources of revenue have increased. So it went from 90,000 in fiscal year 19 up to 134.5 that we're projecting for this coming year. We also have a fundraising line in our budget. So we are projecting that we can fundraise $20,000 toward our operating budget. And that's mostly our annual fundraising appeal, our mailing that we do. We also do some fundraising events. And then our investment fund is basically it functions as an endowment. So we pull 4% interest from that fund, which is really the maximum that is recommended that you pull from that. So that is going up a little bit to 45,000.
Councilor Hanson.
This is direct revenue, so this doesn't, I think, count, like if constituents of other towns come to our library and then shop at our stores, eat at our restaurants, we're not counting that as revenue, even though it probably is, right?
Yep. And we did do, that's a great point too, we've done 2 iterations of the survey where we ask people who come into the library, where did you go before you came to the library? Where do you plan to go after? So we did one in winter of 2019, and then we did another one just this past winter, so February through March. Both times we found that over 70% of the people who came to the library shopped at some Ellsworth business either before or planned to after. So they were, getting lunch at Finn's, they were going grocery shopping, they were spending money somewhere in town, and a lot of those people are out of towners. So we do bring people in.
Councilor Kaplan.
One of the questions I had asked you last year, but you didn't quite have the answer, was what would your baseline budget be, your operating costs with the out-of-town residents versus without?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I did do just a hypothetical budget. So if we looked at, hypothetically, if we only served Ellsworth residents, which would be hard to do because, anybody can come in the doors and use our computers and come to our programs. But if we only provided cards to Ellsworth residents, most of our costs are fixed. I estimated we would save about $29,000 for this coming budget year. Our building costs would be the same. We could reduce staffing a little bit, but in order to remain open the same number of hours, provide the same level of service, that would be my estimate about what the savings would be. So we do get more money from the towns than what we would save.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I also, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead and say what you're gonna say first.
Well, I wanted to just briefly mention that we put together, the library trustees and I worked on we're calling it a budget briefing book, and that's what that packet is that was in your boxes. So we looked at some hypothetical scenarios where just projecting 5 years out, what would happen to library services at various budget levels. So this first scenario is for adequate funding. So this is the budget proposal that we're submitting to City Council for this coming year. So if we are funded at this level, we can maintain our current level of services. So it is a slight increase in the city appropriation. And we would continue to expand our fundraising. We'd fundraise for books. Scarcity funding is if the city council decides to level fund us. So if it's the same city appropriation, the $461,000, we look for 5 years out. This is just a projection. We wouldn't be able to maintain certainly our current level of service. We'd have to cut our hours a little bit each year. We'd cut our staffing a little bit each year. So we'd kind of have to whittle away. So this would be the impact of what we're calling a scarcity budget. And then there's a third scenario, which is we're calling growth funding. So with a slight increase, that's this third line here, there's some additional services we could offer. So this is what we could do if we had a little bit more funding from the city. And we think more funding from the city actually would enable us to make a better case to the surrounding towns that they should support us at a higher level. We could provide more services to them as well. We could expand our hours, which would also be a benefit to surrounding communities and to people coming into Ellsworth. So it just gives you a sense of, as you make budget decisions, this is what we think you know, going forward 3 to 5 years down the line, this is what the impact would be on the community, on the library, and how we can provide services. So happy to answer questions, and I did put a paper copy of that so in your boxes. So if you look at it later and have questions, definitely feel free to contact me.
I have two questions. One is, since we started charging people from outlying towns for their library card, which I know other libraries in the area do not do you have a sense of how many patrons we've lost?
Yeah, that's a good, we've definitely lost some. It's a little bit difficult during COVID to know all of the reasons. Some people maybe we lost during COVID, some people, a lot of people you could use the Blue Hill Library for free, you could use the Bangor Library, you could use Jessup and Bar Harbor. So anybody who lives in a town that's a little bit closer to one of those libraries might choose to shift. I'm not sure, I think we've lost, I don't have an exact number, roughly maybe 500 total patrons, so it's
So again,
it's
those are
significant.
people who are gonna
Yep.
choose to go to a different town and shop rather than our town and
Yep.
shop.
And we honestly get a mix of responses. Some people, we tell them they have to pay, and they understand it because it costs us money to operate the library, and some people just really don't want to pay it, and they're not happy. So it's been a mix. So some people certainly have chosen not to use the library. Yep.
And if we're losing you and we're losing Abby, I assume there's some cost to, going through the process of hiring a new director and new librarian. Does that come out of is that factored into the library's budget for this year, or that's?
It would come out of the HR budget, 'cause
Okay.
the posting and the initial processing of applications will go through human resources, but then it'll be turned over to the library trustees for interviews and decision-making.
And that does relate to another piece that I wanted to mention too, just that we kept payroll for those positions roughly the same because part of the challenge right now is just attracting really quality candidates for those two positions. So I think that's really where the trustees are headed, and we want to be able to, because our pay rates have traditionally been a little bit lower, that's an important piece of bringing somebody on.
I have just a couple of questions, and I'll just preface it by saying and I've said this for a couple of years, in terms of talking about reducing costs is not the same thing as not supporting the library. And we can have genuine discussions about that. And so, when I hear about a number of people that didn't shop and stuff, I also heard very clearly from Heart of Ellsworth and the downtown merchants that they had their best season ever. So I think we have to be careful not to go down the road of trying to equate one thing with another as a way to justify it. I think we should have honest discussions about the library budget and the staffing. And part of what I'm interested in understanding, and I've been asking for a number of years, is what is the breakdown in terms of utilization of the library by times? So is it the same flow of people coming in from 8 to 10 in the morning as it is at 6 to 8? How many staff do you have physically working during those peak times? What is that ratio? And when we talk about the 500 people that might not be using the library, they're not residents of Ellsworth. Because Ellsworth residents can use the library free of charge. And that's been the issue, that's been the concern, is how much do we pay? And we do fund a very strong budget, so everybody needs to understand that the budget that Ellsworth puts forward for our library is a significant budget. It may not be where everybody wants it to be, but it's significant. And I would also like to hear at some point, what didn't happen? What didn't happen this last year in terms of impact of the library, impact on the community? I said this in a meeting several meetings ago where I said I haven't heard anything directly from, I've heard from people advocating for the library, but I haven't heard anybody say, boy, the library wasn't available to me. I couldn't use it for this. Those are the kinds of things that's helpful to me in terms of if I'm going to make decisions about budgets. And when I don't hear those kinds of things about those impacts, I just wonder in terms of, well, what's the justification for increasing the budget and the cost to the community. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in hearing to better understand the request to increase the budget this year as it relates to all of those points.
Yeah, well, one response to that, I think that's important to note that I mentioned earlier is that we did see a decrease in usage during COVID, partly just COVID related. People were just not ready to be out in public. So the staffing cut worked okay for us in 2021 and late 2020. It's not sustainable now. So we've seen, again, 12% increase in circulation, 37% increase in just people walking through the door. Our staff are extremely busy. We have an excellent staff right now. They're very stressed. We're in a staffing transition, so they're also stressed about that, honestly. So I think in order to keep things the same, because we're getting busier, we do need to increase our staffing a little bit. So that's what much of the personnel increase is, and also it's about paying our staff appropriately because they are an excellent staff, great staff to work with. It was the hardest part of my decision to leave is the staff, honestly. And if we're not paying them what they should be paid, we're going to see more attrition. We're going to have trouble retaining and attracting qualified applicants for new positions. So that really is the crux. If you look at our budget, 85% is personnel related. So there's not a lot of excess in our budget that we can cut. We're cutting books already. So we're pretty much cutting as much as we can cut before cutting staff. So it's the payroll and the benefits. And I don't feel honestly that we can cut any of that because I think our staff are the most important resource. They serve our community and do excellent work for us. So that's the main challenge right now is that artificially we were able to maintain lower levels of funding, but now we're at a point where we have to make a decision about how to serve the community and what the community wants from the library. And I think as we've seen usage increase, we're hearing from the community that they really do appreciate our services.
So can you help me reconcile that? You talked about 500 patrons we've lost, but you said there's been an increase by 12%. So have we gained more? We lost some regular users of it, but have we gained on the other side? What accounts for the 12% increase in circulation?
So we lost people early during COVID, so that's where the dip. I don't have like a graph that I can show you, but if you imagine it as a graph, so in late 2020, early 2021, our patrons went like this, and then over the past year, it's really gone up. So our patrons are increasing now. I think we're proportionally seeing more Ellsworth residents using the library. So now it's about half Ellsworth. It was 42% Ellsworth residents just before COVID. So I think that's where the dip in outside people from other towns has been happening. Ellsworth residents were increasing. We have some excellent volunteers who help us sign people up for library cards. We had a table on election day this past November. So we're getting a lot of new residents to Ellsworth who are signing up for cards, and that's a great way to just get them engaged with the community and introduce them to what we have to offer. So we're seeing that, the increase in patrons, especially in Ellsworth. We're also, honestly, I think if somebody's paying for a library card, they're definitely going to use it. So we're just seeing per patron, we're seeing more usage. So people come into the library more. We see a lot of families now. We've got story times going this spring, 2 and 3 times a week. We're doing some more outreach story times to daycares. So all of that is just starting to, it's coming back up, so, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that got cut with the cuts is the evening hours at the library?
Yeah, and that we did cut during COVID, and then we weren't able to reinstate longer evenings because of the budget cut.
I just say that for
yeah.
me as a citizen, that's the thing. That's the time when I would go to the library, and I can't anymore.
Yeah.
So just in case you're wondering specifically when people who used to use the library can't use it, evenings are definitely one of those times.
And I think what we're starting to see now, during COVID, we mostly offered virtual programs. So a staff member would be at home in the evening doing this virtual program, or everybody else is sitting at home. But now we're seeing increased demand for people. They want to be in the library for a program. And if we're closed at 6 p.m., we either have to offer a program and they walk through a dark library to get to our meeting room, or we have to stay open till 8 so that they can. And it's nice to be open because people can then utilize, they can check out books and they can attend a program, they can have dinner downtown. So I'd love to see, at least one night a week open till 7 or 8 again.
Council Blanchett.
Amy, the out-of-town fee is going to stay flat at $30 in FY '23.
That's what the trustees have decided. That's a trustee decision if they wanted to change that.
The resident fee in FY '22 worked out to $55 per resident. I'm using a population of 8,300. FY '23, it bumps up 18% to $65 a head. Why are the residents being hit with an 18% increase per head, which is more than double the resident fee, and yet the non-resident is getting no increase in their fee?
I mean, that's been an ongoing conversation with library trustees, and it certainly is something they could consider to increase the outside, the non-resident fee. I think what the biggest challenge that I personally see is that the higher you set that fee, some people just can't afford that, so we're gonna start losing people. We'll lose people to libraries that they can use for free, where there is no non-resident fee. So we're uniquely situated, we're at a disadvantage because it's not uncommon in the state of Maine to charge people who don't live in your community for a library card, and I think it's appropriate, but we're very unusual around here because we're surrounded by nonprofit libraries. So it's not competition exactly, but the higher you set the fee, the lower you might see, you just might see people choosing not to use the library.
When you mentioned there are people that can't afford that, you talking the out-of-towners or the in-town residents?
That's the out-of-towners, yep.
Because I would submit there are probably some residents that can't afford that either. My other question, you said the visits were up 37%. If I walk through the door to go to a meeting, whatever the meeting may be, in the meeting room downstairs, I'm counted as a visitor?
That does count, yeah, that would track people. We're definitely seeing mostly people coming to use the library. So it's people coming to study, people coming to check out a book, coming to a program that the library is offering.
What would the increase be if you subtract the ones that aren't there to use the library per se in the traditional sense?
I don't have those figures. We do track meeting room reservations separately, so I could pull those statistics. We track the number of meetings that we have. And honestly, during COVID, we haven't had as many meetings in the library. Just outside groups are not using the library quite as much as before. It's starting to increase again, but so I think it's fairly low. But.
Okay.
Council
Thank you.
Caplan.
So you had taken the time to do the budget and calculate out what your cost would be with only Ellsworth residents, regardless of the number of users or the number of visits, and then also with the addition of other users. And the difference in the baseline budget was only $29,000, yet the other revenue, including the cardholder fees, is $134,000. So it actually is paying for itself insofar as the other revenue exceeds what the difference would have been, right?
But if you were operating strictly for Ellsworth residents, then you would not need as much staff, is that correct?
Yeah, most of that 29,000 would be staff reduction. We'd still need certainly a base level, probably at least 2 people working the public service desk at a time. You still need administrative staff, you still need a custodian. Most of our staffing, a lot of our staff are part-time anyway, so we're shifting their schedules based on when we're the busiest. So that takes into account, we could eliminate maybe 1 part-time position. I think that's.
What is the size of the staff? How many bodies down there?
We have 6 full-time, 5 part-time.
And during the day, what's the average number of, the amount of staff that's working, number-wise?
During the day. It fluctuates. Like I said, we have The 4 of the part-timers are circulation desk staff, and part of the reason for that is because we are busiest in the middle of the day. So 9 AM to 10 AM is a slower period, so we have more staff. Some staff come in at noon, because the afternoons are busier. So we have kind of split shifts throughout the day. So it does really vary. So, on the desk, anywhere from, 2 or 3 people usually at a time, and then the administrative staff as well.
And how big is the administrative staff?
So there's me as the director, there's an assistant director, part-time cataloger. Yeah, that's it. We eliminated our administrative assistant 5 years ago. So our assistant director has taken over administrative assistant duties.
So it would be 6 people, plus or minus?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. Chief Mosier, what's during the day, the average shift? How many people in the police department?
During the daytime, we have 2 uniformed police officers,
Okay.
and then the detective, and the chief deputy, the captain, and myself.
Well, you're in that corner, not during the day. So it'd be 5 people. All right, thank you.
Counselor Lance?
I think what you're saying, like if you're $30 for a card from an out-of-towner, but if you increase that to the $65 that Ellsworth residents are doing, you'd have probably 15 people buying a card for $65, right? So we'd actually be backwards by charging that much. So if we keep it at 30, and personally, if you're gonna keep the library open, how do you not fund it? I mean, you either keep it open and fund it, or you don't, right? I am puzzled by I don't know, I would just rather be all in, I think, on it. But I know it's gonna cost taxpayers a little bit more money, but I have a hard time not funding it and trying to make people pay that, and they're not gonna pay it, and they're gonna just drop out of using the library, so.
Yeah, and some of what we found honestly is some people get a little bit frustrated with our staff, and sometimes it's maybe they don't want to come to Ellsworth anymore, they want to go to Blue Hill to use the library and go shopping, or they want to go to Bangor. So I think we're skirting a line of, we want to be as welcoming as possible, and we want to be fair with our funding. But we also want to service, the people who need our services.
Counselor O'Hara?
Look, I'm the newest guy here, so I may not know all the ins and outs, but the way I'm reading this, in 2015, it was $610,000 for the library. Is that correct?
Yep, that was the city appropriation.
Right,
Yep.
right. And this year, in 2023, you're asking for 539.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Do you know of any other city budget that's gone backwards that far?
I did not.
I don't.
Yep. And part of that is we have increased our outside sources of funding. Every year, we're increasing more, so.
Well, nevertheless, if you look at your expenses, if I understand it right, in 15 it was 682, and this year is 673.
Right.
Am I reading that right?
Yep, yep.
I'll tell you, I would support a whole different budget than this, because I don't know any department that's gone backwards to this level and kept going in this city. And I would support a huge increase to this library, considering all of the expenses that have gone throughout this city with new trucks and new police cars and computer programs and extra personnel and assistants for assistants. I don't know why we don't have $1 million budget for this library. And I would support it. Now, I'm sure everyone around me is going to kick me for that, but I don't understand the big grief. You're 2.7% of the budget, the way I figure it. It looks to me like if there's 8,400 people, you're asking for $81 a person. The administrative staff at City Hall is asking for $548 per citizen. I don't know why everyone is so down on this library, and I would like to see the city turn a corner and increase this budget and get serious about our library.
So I just want to comment on before, the use of the word down on the library, because I have voted for cuts. It's not because I'm down on the library. And I think this would be a question, I'd be interested in what your honest reaction is. Until we started as a council talking about the budget, there was not a big, we weren't paying attention about surrounding communities. We were, in fact, the very first meeting I attended as a counselor, one of the very first meetings, was a strategic planning session that the library had. And that discussion was very much along the lines of, we spend a lot for, as a community, to fund other surrounding communities. What should we do? Should we take it in the direction of going nonprofit? That was one of the discussions. Should we create user fees? There's been a lot of momentum and a lot of positive direction in terms of recognizing that we are not just an Ellsworth-only library. And in fairness to the citizens of Ellsworth, there needed to be a direction where there was an attempt and an honest approach for other users of the library to pay a fair share, to access that. And the idea of a nonprofit wasn't something that was accepted or endorsed for a variety of reasons. And so other plans. And that's in large part why some of this has gone down, was the ability to recognize that and draw on that and ask some of these surrounding communities to pay their fair share. And I would say we still should do that. Whatever we ultimately decide as this composition of the council, we still should be pushing for surrounding communities to pay more. They should contribute to the library so that we can make it better. It shouldn't just be on the hands and the backs of Ellsworth residents. And I think that that's a legitimate issue that we should be pushing. Whatever number we agree to in terms of what we fund, we should continue that push, because we are a regional library that's acknowledged by everyone, and we should take that approach. And I certainly would not support $1 million library, because it's not in line with other libraries of this size, nor is there a demonstrated need for that. We should base our budgets based on need, and every decision we make is based on that. And I understand that the emotional attachment that everybody has. Asking questions is not saying that the library is not valued. It just isn't the case. Councilor Hanson.
I just had sort of three things to say that I wrote down so I wouldn't forget. I mean, one thing about the whole question about outlying towns that confuses me a little bit is, if we decide we need to buy a new plow for Ellsworth, we don't complain that other people from other towns drive on our streets, so they should be paying for our plow. So it just doesn't make sense to me. We live in Ellsworth. It's our library. We want it to be what we want it to be. The question about how much we're willing to pay for it is how much we value for our library. If other people want to come and use our library, I think that works to our advantage. It's gravy. It doesn't really matter, but it's gravy. If those people come in, they see our beautiful library with our beautiful services, with our wonderful librarians, who I can bring my 12-year-old in and say, you know my kid, what's the next book she should read? That's what that library has been for me. And that's why I value it, and that's why I think we should value it. So I don't get the conversation about the outlying towns. And then the other, again, and this is just part of whether or not we value our library. It's like a little embarrassing to me that we're not gonna buy books this year, or we're not gonna pay for books for our library. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, I do think we have to be sensible and not just throw money to the wind, but it's a hugely valuable service for the people of our community. It's our library. These people are telling us what it costs to run our library. I have no reason to disbelieve them any more than I disbelieve the public works director when she comes up and tells me how much it's gonna cost to fix Christian Ridge Road. I don't see any reason not to believe it, and I don't see any reason not to fund it.
And kind of backing up what you're saying is, you know, as long as I've known Ellsworth, the library is one of the iconic locations. You have Woodlawn, beautiful, historic. You have the Courthouse Gallery, beautiful, historic. You have the beautiful downtown, the old Grasshopper Shop, which I still miss to this day. And you have the library. And if you're gonna not fully fund it, you might as well paint over that picture right there, because it was important enough for this mural to put it on the wall behind the council. I just can't see not fully supporting our library financially. I know that you support it in theory, and I believe we all do, but this is one of the smallest city budgets, and they're taking the biggest cuts. And I just,
So, just for the record, because you're looking at me and directing it at me, we haven't taken a vote on the budget. So the asking questions is not the deciding vote, so I just remind you of that. The other thing I would say is that when you say fully funded, well, trustees have presented, this is the budget that the trustees have put forward. That fully funds it, is that correct?
That funds us at, yeah, our current level of service, yep.
So that's what I'm going by. So that's the information that we have in front of us. And that's what I will certainly reflect on when it comes time to voting on this issue, is it's not another number, it's what the trustees met and put together. Councilor O'Halloran.
I might add to that it's what the trustees have put together because they've been browbeat for so many years, and they've put a skinny budget together, hoping to avoid getting beat up again. You know, they've already said they're not buying books. This is a library. So I just want to point that out, that this is what the trustees put forward, a budget that is less than it was in 15, and it's skimpy because they knew they were going to get poked and jabbed.
So you know that for a fact?
I do.
Okay,
Start here.
yep.
So the number, like if you were saying this is how much it will cost us to run the library, that's 673. And the number that you're asking for is 539. Am I understanding that?
Right, from the
page
city,
right?
yep, yep.
So I guess I would be interested, because as a council member, every budget that comes before us, every request that we're going through is presented by department heads for whatever reason. So my question to you, and maybe you're not the right person, I know Craig's here, is this the budget that you want the council to vote on? Or is there a different budget, as Councilor O'Halloran is suggesting, that we need to consider as we move forward? Because if we're going to vote on something, we should vote on the budget that's put forward by the people that are running it, and then we can ask questions and respond to that. I'm not interested in responding to the personal feelings of, boy, this isn't the right budget. So can you answer that question? Is this the budget that you want us to vote on, or is there a different budget that we should be pursuing?
Yes, this is the budget that was approved by library trustees that we would like council to vote on. Yep.
Thank you.
And to respond quickly to the comment about the towns, I will say that, you know, one of the challenges with the towns is that we request funding from 18 different towns. So this year, we prioritized the list of, I think it was 5 towns that are the larger towns that we could focus on. But honestly, it does take a significant amount of my time. It takes a lot of the trustees' time to attend these meetings, talk to people, and sometimes we don't get any funding at all from these towns. So my recommendation, just my personal recommendation, is if city council would like to get more funding from the towns, I think it needs to be a joint effort between council and trustees. I think the funding task force has been a great step in that direction, so it's been wonderful to work with Casey and Michelle. But if that's a continuing conversation, that is my recommendation. I think some libraries actually, municipalities will form contracts with other municipalities where, you know, it's part of a package and it's part of a conversation rather than just, you know, submitting a letter with a funding request, because we're treated as a charitable contribution. So I think that's certainly, if that's the avenue that city council would like to continue to go down, that needs more work, I think. So.
Councilor Lyons.
I like to see every budget be as skinny as possible. And I believe that number probably is. And you did say that as far as buying books and stuff, you're still gonna do it. You're just gonna use money brought in from other resources to buy them. So it's not cutting out buying books. But I do
Yeah.
think that this,
And that is that is a one-time only cut. We can't cut books out of our budget again.
right,
So,
right.
So what the plan is that we would fundraise for books, and then we do get, we can get grants for books. It's a lot easier to fundraise for books than it is to fundraise for staff salaries. So we feel that the core services are in here, and the books are something that we can, certainly, it will be significant amount of time for our staff to do that, but we feel we can meet that target, and we can maintain the current level of our book budget through fundraising. So that's the plan.
Jessica?
Do you know of any other library directors that have to go to several town meetings and put in budget requests to other towns to fund that library?
I think we're I think the library in Holton requests funding for maybe 20 towns, but they don't attend all the town meetings and quite like we do, so we might be number 2, but yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm here for another week and a half, so feel free to contact me if you have additional questions.
Sorry to see you
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you.
All right, council,
Craig
Just-
McDonald,
I got somebody.
Chair of the Board of Trustees for the Ellsworth Library, and always reluctant to be the last individual to speak after a long night. I wanted to do something a bit different tonight. It was with extreme reluctance that we accepted Amy's resignation as director. I joined the board in late summer of 2019, and from that time, I've been incredibly impressed by Amy's investment, dedication, her effort to make the budget and the library overall as powerfully workable as possible. So if I could take 5 minutes, and I think this will be something Amy should receive as a kind of recognition, and the trustees felt that this would be very appropriate, and this is Amy's last time here and last time with the library for a meeting. So with that said, with the upcoming departure of the Ellsworth Public Library's director on May 6th, the trustees would like to take this opportunity to express appreciation and thanks for 5.5 years of leadership and dedication to the mission of the library, as well as to staff and patrons. The Ellsworth Public Library serves a vital function as a center point for learning in all forms and for all ages. Over the course of the past 6 years, the director has been instrumental in ensuring that the library continues to provide an ever-expanding, varied, and comprehensive range of services, from those centered at the library to those services more focused on virtual learning. During the period where COVID required a significant modification to established programs and procedures, working with a dedicated staff, the director was able to ensure that core services remained in place and that library patrons had access to library resources and materials. Guiding the inclusion of the Minerva program has resulted in library patrons having statewide access to a consortium of over 60 libraries throughout the state and beyond. Over the past 6 years, under the director's guidance, options for virtual programming have expanded, now more diverse and inclusive, as have an extensive range of programs for all ages based at the library. In 2021-22, patrons could elect to join one of many book discussion groups and workshops, join with children in storytime gatherings, be involved in graphic novel workshops, participate in shared discussions with noted regional and national authors, and join in ongoing Tai Chi classes. This listing serves to highlight but a few of the many and varied programs offered by the library. The Riverview Room has again become a focal point for a range of community groups, as well as for the resumption of displays of art by area artists. Ellsworth school students currently have art on display at the library. One example that might be viewed as outside the norm for a library is a program provided together with AARP, American Association for Retired Persons, where skilled volunteers from the AARP provide tax assistance for those seeking help with completion of federal and state tax forms. Multiple tables have been set up in the Riverview Room over the course of recent weeks, all chairs filled as a rule from one day to the next. Amy was instrumental in setting this program up as well. The listing of Amy Weinhardt's accomplishments since joining the Ellsworth Public Library as director, recognized by the Board of Trustees, staff, and patrons, is notable for a common theme: a dedication and commitment to the highest standards of what makes a truly inclusive, welcoming, and enriching library experience. This same dedication to superior programming and service to the community is mirrored by all staff at the library. Working with the Board of Trustees, the director and staff consistently aim for honoring the spirit of what a truly inclusive municipal library should represent to the community. The citizens of Ellsworth should be deservedly proud of what has been accomplished to this point in achieving that goal. At the same time, the trustees remain committed to a responsible use of funds allocated for the library, as well as remaining committed to exploration of any reasonable avenues to maximize funds from other sources. Under the current director and Board of Trustees oversight, the library has asked for a budget that we feel is appropriate and not excessive. The projected library budget as submitted allows for continued levels of programming and staffing with very little room for modification without significant and unfortunate reductions in both programming and staffing. Use of carryover funds and related reallocations of funding, much of which resulted from reduced programming and service costs during the extended COVID health emergency, have largely been utilized. As represented in the budget briefing report recently provided to all members of the council, without levels of funding that acknowledge the above for the 22-23 fiscal year, both programming and staffing will be negatively impacted and could set the stage for something of a downward spiral that would impact on many levels, not least of which the morale of the staff that is consistently well-served, both the library and those that utilize its services. Amy, on behalf of the trustees, our thanks. We wish you were not leaving, but wish you well. Thank you.
So as we wrap up this first workshop, any questions, comments that anybody wants to make before we depart?
See you next week.
Same time, same place?
Do we have to vote to leave, or we just can?
No, we can just leave. Workshop is concluded.